If you like this video, please consider supporting me on Patreon. For just $1 a month, your name can appear at the beginning of this and many other upcoming videos. When I was a kid, there were very few cartoons that I absolutely loved as much as Spongebob Squarepants. It was one of those very few shows where I absolutely needed to see every single new episode exactly as it was being aired. In some way or another, everybody has that one special cartoon that helped define them and introduce them to a whole new era of entertainment. Some have Ninja Turtles, others have Ren and Stimpy, and I have My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. And also Spongebob Squarepants. I honestly can't imagine what my childhood would have been like without this show. And I'm definitely not alone in this. SpongeBob ended up going from being just some kid's cartoon to a worldwide cultural phenomenon. There's millions of people of every age who fully embrace the cultural impact this show made, and how it's impacted them in their lives. It was a huge influence in that it helped so many people develop their sense of humor in a good way. It's a little bit difficult to pinpoint a single definitive reason as to how the show became such a huge icon, as a lot of people have pointed out their own ideas as to what gave the show so much lasting power. But regardless of different people trying to understand SpongeBob on a deeper level, it's universally agreed upon that it's those first 3 seasons that really made it stand out. It was a creative show with a diverse setting which led to a lot of interesting stories. The characters have a ton of personality, being wacky and zany but also really down to earth and relatable. It was energetic and exciting but also really laid back and calm. It had a fun childlike charm to it, but it was never grating for older audiences. And that's actually a key element to SpongeBob Squarepants as a whole. It was a show made for all ages that can appeal to pretty much anyone. You could be a kid, an adult, even an old-timer and still be entertained by this show. And the reason for that is that SpongeBob was constructed in a way that it could pretty much be anything that it wants. It didn't have a lot of restrictions for telling its stories like an overarching plot, so it had a really wide range for trying new things which prevented it from being formulaic. There was a ton of free ground for it to experiment with, and it led to so many endless possibilities. It was one of the most imaginative shows out there. Taking a premise as simple as SpongeBob and Patrick trying to sell chocolate, or Squidward trying to start a band, and going all the way with it. It's safe to say that Nickelodeon really wouldn't be what it is today without SpongeBob Squarepants, spanning a legacy that very few shows can even match. When Steven Hillenburg created SpongeBob, he created something very special. A cartoon that not just entertained, but touched people in so many different ways, uniting millions of people in their love for this cartoon sponge and honoring his memory for his contribution to animation. A true hallmark of cartoon entertainment and a poster child for a whole generation. So with SpongeBob being so popular, of course there were going to be a bunch of companies trying to capitalize on it. Cereal, macaroni and cheese, Pop-Tarts, books, comics, and even video games. And I'll admit, when it came to SpongeBob games, I was an absolute sucker for them. I didn't care how bad they were, I played the shit out of them. Just the idea that you could actually take control of SpongeBob and all his friends and take them on wacky adventures yourself was a dream come true for any SpongeBob fan. And there was definitely a lot of SpongeBob games over the years. Revenge of the Flying Dutchman, Obstacle Odyssey, Lights Camera Square, Plankton's Robotic Revenge, and even a video game based on the hit movie. But out of all the SpongeBob games, there was one in particular that stood out above all the others. A video game that took all SpongeBob fans by storm, and set itself as the golden standard for how to make a SpongeBob game. And it was called Battle for Bikini Bottom.
I'm ready!
This game became an instant classic among SpongeBob fans. Developed by Heavy Iron, AWE, and Vicarious Visions while being published by THQ, it was loved and praised by so many fans of the show. A few years after it came out, it more or less went underground and wasn't really talked about for a long time. But sure enough, nostalgia would eventually get the best of us, and one way or another, many SpongeBob fans revisited that classic game from many years ago, and successfully brought it back into discussion. And like many nostalgia classics, fans have been asking for an HD remake for years. And surely enough, it was announced on June 5th, 2019 that an HD remake was indeed in the works. Now it's only a few weeks away from release, and people are simply excited to get a chance to relive their memories of this game in a whole new way. So what was it about Battle for Bikini Bottom that made it so appealing? Why did so many people want to see it recreated for modern consoles? How did this particular SpongeBob game separate itself from the others? Obviously, this game was made for fans of the show, so it needed to appeal to SpongeBob fans to be successful. To do this, it needed to properly incorporate the show's sense of humor, its world, its characters, and the tone of the cartoon into an interactive experience. And in every regard, it succeeded with flying colors. Plankton creates a robot army to take the Krabby Patty formula, but forgets to set the switch to obey, setting it to not obey. Does that sound familiar?
Coin-operated self-destruct. Not one of my better ideas.
Now SpongeBob, Patrick, and Sandy must travel across every corner of Bikini Bottom to stop the robots and save the world. It's as crazy and off the wall as you can possibly get for a SpongeBob story. It's wacky, cartoonish, incredibly over the top, and they go all the way with it. But that's what makes it so much fun. It's a really goofy story that feels like something that would actually happen in the show, and the premise has a sense of originality to it, and the game explores it in a way that really can't be done in the TV show. Like the show itself, it takes an interesting idea and really experiments with it, creating all sorts of possibilities with its concept. It also gives the player a reason to explore Bikini Bottom in such close detail, completing quests and finding collectibles to get more golden spatulas. And this leads into something that I absolutely love about this game. Its pacing. It never feels like it's going by too fast or too slowly. It always goes by at just the right speed. Like the TV show, it doesn't have any restrictions in terms of story and premise, allowing you to freely progress through the game in your own terms. And however you choose to go about completing objectives, it feels natural. It almost plays out like a whole season of the show, in that it plays out in a highly episodic fashion, with each level being its own collection of events. And whenever you start an objective or enter a new level, it never feels like a detour from the main plot. Every mission and side quest feels like a contribution to fighting the robots and undoing the chaos they're causing in the city. Each victory gets you closer to defeating Plankton's army, and each of the challenges have a significant feel to them. You feel like you're doing something different throughout the whole experience, keeping the gameplay refreshing. The way all these levels and missions are laid out makes you feel like you're actually playing through a whole season of the show. The game is also about 6 hours long, which actually fits the standard length for a season of the cartoon. But it's not just the pacing of the game, it's also the way the game looks, sounds, feels, and how it was written to capture the charm and essence of the show. Everything about the game's aesthetic takes full advantage of the SpongeBob license to provide you with a heavily immersive experience, to the point where you really feel like you've been teleported into the world of the show. The sound design is amazing, with so many things inspired from sound effects from the show. The squeaking in SpongeBob's running animation, the piano keys when he tiptoes, the whistle whenever you collect Patrick's socks, the sound bubbles throughout the game, SpongeBob's alarm clock, the rusty sound of opening doors, getting zapped by jellyfish, and that's just scratching the surface. They all sound like really authentic sound effects from the show, and they feel natural without sounding like stock audio. It's the kind of sound design that really molds with the environment in a way that actually adds to the gameplay. And speaking of environment, the game's atmosphere is amazing. Not only are there a lot of vibrant colors with plenty of open space to explore, but the way these levels are actually designed are near perfection if you're a SpongeBob fan. They're not just a bunch of levels designed for a platform game. It feels like the developers really took the time to watch the show and modeled the levels after several iconic locations. Jellyfish Fields is a really big field with an actual ecosystem, complete with a lush landscape and a consistent layout. Downtown is a giant city with tall buildings you can mount and rooftops that you can jump across, complete with streets and destroyed rubble from the robot invasion. Goo Lagoon is a pretty faithful recreation of the beach from the show, while also taking a lot of creative liberties. They added sand castles, a fortress, a cavern, and even a carnival with all sorts of exploration and side activities to participate in. The Mermalair is pretty fun and also the most intuitive, as it highly revolves around solving puzzles. You have to carefully utilize your arsenal to complete challenges and unlock new paths. It's actually pretty creative, as it tests the player's brain power over simply throwing platforming sections at them. There's Rock Bottom, which I really find interesting given how little they had to work with. Of all the locations, this one was never really explored in the show, so they were challenged with creating original ideas for it. In spite of its dark setting, it manages to be really vibrant, and you can also do things like explore a museum and travel white pits while collecting art for Mrs. Puff, for some unknown reason. There isn't much to say about Sand Mountain, as it's basically just built around sliding down different sliding courses, but it's interesting to see how it was built between different resorts. The Dutchman's Graveyard is pretty cool, with its broken up ships and green aura, making it feel like a really haunted pirate graveyard. Even SpongeBob's Dream World is brilliantly designed, as you travel across different characters' dreams with a unique concept behind each dream that properly fits each character. What makes these worlds so much fun to explore is that they each have a unique gimmick and aesthetic to help them feel vastly different from each other, adding a ton of diversity to the levels you explore. And the best part is how the game manages to tie it all together. In some areas, you can actually make out different levels and even the hub world in the background. You can see things like SpongeBob's neighborhood, downtown, Goo Lagoon, and Sand Mountain from a distance if you're standing from the right angle. It's an amazing attention to detail that makes the game's world feel so much more connected and an actual experience based on the show. Everything about this game's level design does a fantastic job emulating the atmosphere of the cartoon, and it's this attention to detail that makes the game so much fun to play. The game is also chock full of references with so many Easter eggs that show how the developers really did their research. And instead of making them blatantly obvious, they're cleverly hidden or featured in the background in a way that doesn't interfere with the gameplay. Remember the cave from Goo Lagoon? It has drawings of SpongeBob and Patrick as cavemen referencing the time Squidward traveled to the past. It's placed in a way that doesn't distract you so you can freely glance at it while getting through the platforms. The iconic bank can be found downtown, SpongeBob's dehydrated form when in Sandy's dome. Even the NPCs throughout the game look like models of background characters taken from the show. But my favorite one is definitely the one from Rock Bottom, where if you go near the candy machine, a bus appears on the street and immediately leaves. Remember that scene from the episode? That's what they're referencing. That is absolutely brilliant. These references are a great way to carry elements from the show into the game without feeling like artificial additions, and it further adds to the idea that you've actually been teleported into the show. Even the soundtrack feels like music that would be used in the cartoon, with all sorts of familiar tunes and instruments resembling the score of the show itself. But it's not just the level design, soundtrack, and music that makes you feel like you were transported into the show. What really makes it work is probably the most important element of this game. Its writing and its comedy. Everything about the humor is an absolute goldmine for SpongeBob fans. Almost as if the actual writers from the show's prime were behind it. It's witty, clever, creative, smart, well-timed, and it perfectly fits the tone of the show. The way each of these jokes are written and delivered are done with such finesse and pace so well that you actually feel like you're watching an episode of the show. It has a specific nature that's really organic and a perfect reflection of why people love the jokes in the show so much. It's wacky and off the wall, but also properly integrated in the world it's set in. It's random, but at the same time, it's not. It's the exact kind of humor you would expect from the show. And it's also in part by how perfectly all the characters are represented. Not only did they actually get the original voice actors, well at least most of them, but they're all written in a way that immediately feels familiar if you're an advent viewer of the cartoon. SpongeBob, for example, is properly characterized as a kid at heart with an optimistic point of view. He's naive, but he approaches problems with an innocent attitude and still takes responsibility for himself. He's really in character throughout the game, as is the rest of the cast. Patrick is an idiot, but in a way that's fun and not annoying. And Squidward is a cynic who feels out of place in the more upbeat world that he's set in. Mrs. Puff has a nervous, unstable personality because of SpongeBob making her go insane. Mr. Krabs is greedy, Mermaid Man is a senile old man with Barnacle Boy being a straight man to him, and Larry is a show-off who wants the ladies' attention. Just about every mainstream character makes an appearance alongside some minor ones, and the game captures their charm stupendously. And the exchanges they have are so reminiscent of how they behave in the show that it makes the writing all the more fun. And even outside of the exchanges between characters, the game is loaded with hilarious bits that take great inspiration from the source material. There's actually a mission where you get rewarded both a golden spatula and one of Patrick's socks for annoying Squidward and destroying his house. And the way the game introduces you to damage and health restoration by pummeling SpongeBob with a random safe is so random, but it also fits in place since it fits with the kind of jokes you'd see in the show.
Let me be struck by a flying ice cream truck. And live!
The fish announcer from the news makes an appearance during boss battles, and the humor he provides is a great way to implement a background element into the gameplay. And Robo Plankton was apparently engaged to marry Robo Spongebob.
You dogs have destroyed my beautiful bride. We were supposed to get married next week.
Did he say married?
I'll repair you, baby.
Everything about Battle for Bikini Bottom is a dream come true for fans of the show, with every element surrounding it feeling like an authentic transition of the show into video game form. The music, the sound effects, the level designs doing an amazing job resembling environments from the show, the writing, the comedy, the characters. It's the purest of a SpongeBob experience that you can possibly get in a video game. And that's not even including how the gameplay is so much fun. There's a lot of features and controls that really add a sense of endearment for getting around and completing challenges. The platforming sections are fun and challenging without being too complicated, and the game gives you a fair amount of space for learning and mastering each section. And because of how every action you take contributes to completing the game, every quest and collectible has a purpose to it. Instead of making the missions repetitive fetch quests, they all have a sense of flavor to them, with each one requiring you to utilize SpongeBob, Patrick, and Sandy in different ways. And what makes makes it even better is that they took the time to give unique gameplay between all three characters. The trio are cleverly used in conjunction with each other to solve puzzles, access new areas, and complete challenges to proceed through the levels. Sandy is very versatile for platforming segments with her ability to glide and swing over huge gaps. Patrick can lift objects and throw them at distant targets. And Spongebob has a range of different bubble-based tools to attack enemies in different ways. Every ability has a purpose, and the game requires a lot of experimentation with each one to solve puzzles. And it's made easier with how highly accessible the bus stops are. These can be used to switch between two characters, and they do a pretty good job having them set at locations where you need them. Puzzles requiring a certain character almost always have a bus stop next to them, so you can immediately swap to the one you need. Throughout the game you come across a variety of tikis which are placed and scattered throughout the levels. They're also organized in a way where you can use them to your advantage, such as helping with platforming segments and stacking them to access new areas. The combat is also fairly satisfying as the game provides you with a variety of different enemy types to encounter. Each of them attack you in different ways, and some even require strategy and tactics to defeat. It's also helpful that the game provides you with cinematic cutscenes that introduce you to each new enemy, giving you an idea of how they function and time to think and strategize how to approach them. There's also the boss battles, which are really well designed and each have their own pattern for the player to learn. And the final battle isn't actually a boss fight. It's a challenge of your platforming skills with a final level taking place inside Robo Spongebob. For a game that hyper-focuses on level design over huge battles, it's a really clever challenge that requires extra precision and caution. Other features include teleportation boxes as well as the ability to fast travel to almost any location in the game using the pause menu. Some collectibles require you to unlock a certain ability before you can obtain them, but with these fast travel options you can instantly teleport yourself to an item as soon as it's available. It's one of the few times where a game actually succeeds at encouraging backtracking instead of forcing it. I know there's a lot of people who have problems with the Kelp Forest being a badly designed level with horrible platforming and tedious puzzles, but a huge saving grace that the game has is that if you don't want to do something, you don't have to. You only actually need 75 golden spatulas to complete the game, and getting them isn't really too difficult or time consuming. And that's a feature that helps give the game so much replay value. It doesn't force 100% completion on you, fuck Batman Arkham Knight by the way, and with the task of collecting spatulas being set across so many levels, you can actually play stages and complete the game in almost any order that you want. So yeah, it's easy to tell how this SpongeBob game managed to stand out amongst all the others. It's not just a SpongeBob game, but a good SpongeBob game. While there's still those SpongeBob games with good qualities to them, none of them can hold a candle to Battle for Bikini Bottom. The animations are energized and properly represent the zaniness of the show. It has intuitive gameplay with a huge variety of different mechanics that manage to stay refreshing throughout the experience. It brilliantly simulates the setting of the show with liberal use of environments, making the entire world feel huge and connected. It comes up with original concepts to separate itself from other SpongeBob games, allowing it to be true to itself while still being faithful to the license. And its humor captures the charm and essence of the show perfectly, with all the characters and jokes being used to their maximum potential. For a licensed game, this was way better than it had any right to be, and it's definitely earned its status as a cult classic. It's one of those cases where the developers really used the source material to its strengths and ran with it, taking full advantage of the SpongeBob name and emulating everything that people loved about the show. It was actually the Sonic 2020 movie of its time, going above and beyond to create the best possible love letter to fans of the show, and they succeeded in every capacity. I really look forward to playing the remake when it comes out, and I'm sure a lot of others will be too. So let's get together, pre-order Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated, and await to replay a golden game from our past. Until then, stay cool.